When we send our kids to school, we expect them to come home. It never really crosses your mind that they won't until they don't. The amount of panic and fear that any parent feels who has been in those shoes and experienced that feeling of complete helplessness is unimaginable. For the parents of 15-year-old Kyplin Davis, that fear became their reality on May 2nd, 1995, when their daughter left for school for the very last time, never making it back home. This is the case of Kyplin Davis, and this is Gone in a Blink. Hey true crime fans, I'm your host Heather, and welcome to episode 19 of Gone in a Blink. I hope everyone is staying cool out there. I think the temp where we're at made it up into the hundreds here a few days ago. I know it may be much hotter than that for many of you, and for some of you who are experiencing much cooler temps right now, I definitely envy you. So today's case is about a teenage girl who went missing from her high school in May of 1995. Today, we are talking about the case of Kyplin Davis, and I had the pleasure of talking with Kyplin's younger sister, Karissa. So if you're ready, let's jump right in. Kyplin Davis was a 15-year-old sophomore at Spanish Fork High School in her hometown of Spanish Fork, Utah. She grew up with one brother, one older sister, and one younger sister, Karissa, who we are hearing from today. Here's Karissa. Tell me about your sister, Kyplin. What exactly was it like growing up with her?
So with Kyplin, she would used to babysit me when I was little. And so I was the youngest. And she was the third oldest. And I have one brother and then two sisters. And so she was the outgoing sister. I was this quiet, shy person. So she was the social butterfly. And she made friends. She had a lot of friends. And she had a group of group of friends that she met through drama club. So she was into drama and stuff like that. She was working on a play, basically. So she's working, I think it's Whites or something like that. So she's working on that, and so she was helping with that. I think she was helping out with other things that related. So she was very helpful, and she was this person that cared about everyone. She was this very bright, cheerful person, and she had a bright, bubbly personality. And she loved her friends and family, and she would do anything for anyone, and she would drop what she's doing just to help someone out. And so that's the kind of person she is. And I really looked up to Kyplin a lot because she was a person I can go to.
Kyplin Davis was last seen at Spanish Fork High School on May 2nd, 1995. She had attended her regular morning classes as well as her early driver's education class. However, she failed to show up for her afternoon classes that she usually attended after lunch. The high school where Kyplin attended was only about 8 blocks from the Davis' home, and when Kyplin didn't return home by 5 p.m., which was the usual time she would get home after school, her family began to worry. Kyplin was reported missing to authorities. However, like so many cases of missing teens, her case was initially treated as a runaway case, pretty much due to her age and the fact that it was reported that she had been in an argument with her family about school before she had disappeared. One major problem with the runaway theory was the fact that all of her belongings were still in her locker, including her purse, her dental retainer, makeup, and school books. And it is important to note that Karissa was only 9 years old when her sister went missing. Here's more from Karissa. What do you remember about the morning of May 2nd, 1995, before Kyplin disappeared?
That morning, I was still asleep, and we shared a room. And so she got out before I did. She got up like around like 4:30 for driver's ed, and I was still asleep. And so I took the bus to school, and my mom took her to school that day because my parents took turns taking her to school, and so my mom was taking her to school. And I think she like hit the snooze button a couple times, thinking, "Okay, I can make a miss a class, no big deal," typical teenager stuff. And so she could like, okay, I can be late to like a class. I don't know if my parents woke her up or she went to my parents and said, "Hey, can I miss class because I slept in?" And I was like, "No, you cannot do that, you can't miss a class." And we kind of had a little argument, and things were said. I'm not going to say what my dad said. It's very, hurtful. And so we're not like a perfect family. We all make mistakes. We say things we don't mean, My dad says something to my sister, and he regrets it to this day. And he told me, he's like, "That's my last words I said to my daughter," basically some hurtful words. And I think my sister understand that my dad didn't mean it. It's a rough morning, and like we all have bad mornings, right? She was going through trying to get her makeup on. My dad's getting kind of frustrated. "Hey, like your mom's like waiting for you." And so eventually that kind of point she left to go in my mom's car to take off. My mom gave her some lunch money for like lunch, and my mom's thinking like, why is Kyplin like, upset? Like, what's going on? I don't think she said anything to my sister, but my sister went to school. I'm thinking she's not the only person late to school that day, so she's thinking, okay, I feel a little better. No, I'm not the only person being late for school, because I've probably been late to school myself too. It's a typical norm, And so I think she's not the only one late. I think she went off to like her driver's ed, and then she continued on the day, and then she missed like 4 to 5 classes that day. So she missed some classes. So she talked to friends, and she had lunch with them and stuff like that. And people, I think, did see her and whatnot. But back then, they didn't have cameras in the school. And so where she was at, they didn't have like a security camera. But now they do have that nowadays. But back then, they didn't have that. And so people had seen her throughout the day, and she did miss class. I was still in school. And then I remember that day, she would have come home around like 5:30, whatever, because she had a lot going on. And then she, of course, didn't show up. And that was like, out of the norm. And so I came home. I'm not for sure I got home off the bus. So I would come home. I would call my mom up from work, telling her like we're home from like school. And that morning, I don't think I ever called my mom that morning. And so no one called my mom, and then the school called and left a message saying that, your daughter missed some classes. And my dad got a little worried, like what's going on. My mom called basically being like, what's going on? And so that's what I remembered that day. And my parents went down to the school and asked if anyone had seen Kyplin. And I don't think no one said anything. And so I think me and my dad went there, same thing. I don't think no one's seen her that day. But he did phone calls to friends and family. I think knocked on doors. And anything that the parents would ever do to go find their daughter. Like, what's going on? Where's she at? My dad's like, everyone had phones back then, And so she would have called up and say, "Hey, I'm running late," stuff like that. But no phone call or nothing from Kyplin. So they did call the police. And then, of course, the police were like, "Oh, she's like a 15-year-old girl. She's with some friends," that type of thing,
Mm-hmm.
And she would never, like, run away from home. Like, never. She would never do anything. I don't think she ever mentioned to anyone that she was running away from home at all. That was not her at all. If you were going to run away, you would take, like, money, clothes, personal belongings, and her stuff was still in her locker, like, her bag and everything. So
Okay.
I'm thinking she would have gone off with some people to lunch or go to get a drink, then come back to get her personal belongings and then go work on a play or go work on some stuff for, like, our church, and she was, into church-related stuff. And so a lot going on. She would have done someone else that day and then come home, but she never came home. No phone call, nothing. And so my parents were panicking at this point, like what to do. Like, my daughter's missing. She did not run away from home. And so my dad was super worried. The next morning, my dad went to the school, and he went on the intercom and kind of telling people what's going on. I would do anything to find my daughter. He couldn't sleep. He couldn't drink. None of that. He was like not eating, not sleeping. Like, where is she?
Mm-hmm.
And were panicking, and then of course the police was like, "Oh, she's this." Like, no, she's not a runaway at all, not whatsoever.
Kyplin's family have said that it is out of character for her to leave without notifying anyone, and she had a lot to look forward to. She was just about to get her driver's license, and her older sister was getting ready to get married.
And then I think she went off with 2 boys that she knew from school. I don't know them. We grew up in Spanish Fork. We knew everyone. Related to so-and-so, or do you know people from Spanish Fork? We knew everyone. That's kind of community we were in. And so I don't know them boys personally. My sister knew them through high school because they're a bit older than she was. And so I think she just took off with some boys or whatever up to Spanish Fork Cannon, and then it went from there.
So were the police treating this strictly as a runaway case? Were they not really doing anything because they assumed that she had run off?
I mean, at first, it was like my parents knew for sure she would never run away from home. But that got things going that way because, like, she's not a runaway. She would never do that. And so she said, "Oh, she's probably with some friends. She would come home." But she never came home.
The first several days, and even into several weeks, what was it like? Was it just a waiting game to see if she came back? Or what was it like in that period of time?
I knew for sure wherever, like, she's not, I don't think coming home, because people that are involved in her case made it obviously clear they're not saying anything to where she's at.
Police interviewed several individuals, some of which attended school with Kyplin. Timothy Brent Olson, Christopher Jepson, Scott Brunson, and David Leifson all attended Spanish Fork High School and were members of the school's drama club along with Kyplin. They claimed to have been in the school's auditorium hanging lights to prepare for an upcoming performance on the day that Kyplin disappeared. However, a choir was performing in the auditorium that day, and it was at the time that the men claimed to have been hanging the lights, and none of the choir members recalled seeing any of the young men. A 5th man by the name of Gary Von Blackmore was also interviewed. He did not attend Spanish Fork High School, and he had no previous ties to Kyplin. After Kyplin's disappearance, rumors began to spread that she was killed and her body was buried in a nearby canyon. Timothy Olson changed his story on more than one occasion. He first told authorities that he saw someone hit Kyplin over the head with a softball-sized rock, and that he then helped bury her body. Here's more from Karissa on the man who is accused of killing her sister, Timothy Brent Olson.
And so one person is in prison right now, serving time, and so he gets out to February 2026. And so he gets out because he's involved with my sister, and he knows where she is. I think he said someone did this to my sister, and then he won't say who it is.
Are we talking about a young man by the name of Timothy Brent Olson?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes. That's him.
Okay. So he was he a classmate of Kyplin's?
Yeah, so he went to school with Kyplin, so.
Okay. So was he the same age as her, or was he older?
He was 18. So she was 15, he was 18. He was a senior.
Okay. So how did it come about that police knew to talk to him?
I don't know him personally, but what I've heard about him was he was not a very nice person. I think all he did was party and drink, and he was just, we went to court with him, and that was very, it made me very uncomfortable being in the same room with him, because the way he looked at me and his evil little grin is like, I'm not going to tell you nothing where your sister's at. I'm not saying anything. And he was just being just not mean. He just he lied to my family twice to where she was. Or she could have been there at one point, and of course they moved her, but he just lied. He's a liar.
What was the first initial thing that he told your family? And please stop me if I'm wrong with this, but he originally told them that someone else had hit your sister over the head with a rock, and that he witnessed it and then he helped move her body, but he would not reveal who actually did it. Is that correct?
That's correct. I'm thinking he's afraid of this person because I'm thinking of, like, if you tell anyone, I will hurt you and your family. I think he's been threatened.
So then did he come back and admit that he did it, or what was his second story?
He said he did rape my sister, but I don't know if he did it or not, or if it's someone else. It's unknown. I don't know who this unknown person is. I think he's just protecting this person because he's just scared.
So he is in prison now. He was charged with manslaughter?
Yeah.
But he still says he knows where Kyplin is, but he refuses to tell anyone?
Yeah.
Okay.
According to the Charlie Project, several indictments were made in 2005 in Kyplin's case. In April, Scott Brunson, who I mentioned earlier was one of the young men being interviewed by police, was charged with perjury and lying to a federal agent. In December 2005, Brunson struck a deal with prosecutors, pleading guilty to 6 counts of making false statements to a grand jury as well as FBI agents. Then, in August of that same year, Gary Vaughn Blackmore was also charged with perjury and lying to a federal agent. In September, Timothy Olson was charged with 15 counts of lying to a grand jury. In the summer of 2006, Olson's perjury trial was set to begin. He had no defense and was therefore convicted on all charges and was sentenced to 12.5 years in prison, which was actually way more than the normal sentence for this type of offense. However, it was not as long as prosecutors had requested, and it was reported that the judge had taken Kyplin's murder into account while deciding the length of Olson's sentence. Then, in October, Christopher Jepson was charged with perjury before a grand jury and making false statements to an FBI agent. In late summer of 2007, Jepson was also convicted of 4 counts of perjury and received 5 years in prison. And in November, David Leifson was also charged with perjury and also received 5 years in prison. So it's extremely clear that these men have something to hide. Why else would you perjure yourself on the stand if you were innocent, unless maybe you were trying to protect another individual? The timeline of charges and convictions can be a little confusing. So, in October of 2007, Jepson was officially charged with the murder of Kyplin Davis. But by May of 2009, 1 month before his trial was set to begin, he agreed to a plea deal with the prosecution and pled no contest to obstruction of justice, and prosecutors therefore agreed that he could no longer be charged in Kyplin's disappearance. Jepson maintains his innocence in Kyplin's disappearance and still claims he was not involved and doesn't know what happened to her. To me, it's strange that Jepson got off so easily if he was originally being charged in Kyplin's murder. Unless maybe the prosecution believed he was not the actual murderer and was instead an accomplice to that murder, and maybe his role in the whole thing was very minimal. Here's more from Karissa.
Do you think there were more than one person involved in this?
Oh, yeah, exactly. So there's a guy named Rucker Leifson, and I know he is, I don't think he might have been with Timmy that day, but I think he might have helped with the body, but there's him, and then there's Chris Jepson. Chris, on a hand, had nothing to do with my sister. He was involved in the case and everything, but he didn't, hurt my sister anyway. That, he was not that person that he was with Timmy now. So Chris was not with Timmy that day at all. And so Timmy and someone else was but Chris wasn't up there with them. But I'm thinking he knows where my sister's at, but not to say anything because I think he's also scared. So they did go to court for Chris also, but I know for sure that Chris did not kill my sister.
Were these boys that your sister would run around with? Was she known to hang out with them or run around with them?
So I'm thinking through the drama group. I'm not for sure if all were involved in the drama group, but Chris actually, I think he was involved in the drama scene.
Okay.
That's how you knew my sister. I think he's through the drama crowd. So.
Do you know if they hung out outside of the drama club?
I'm not for sure they did hang out inside, outside school that I know of.
Did Kyplin have any enemies that you know of?
I don't think so. I don't think I ever heard I don't think I've ever heard anybody say mean things to my sister. I don't think she had any enemies because she had like a lot of friends. No one ever like had it out for her at all.
Authorities believe Kyplin was raped and then murdered. They believe that she knew her killer and that several others whom she knew are helping to cover up the crime. Ultimately, they believe that Timothy Olson and David Leifson are responsible for Kyplin's murder, while the other men who have been mentioned are providing alibis for them. In February of 2011, Olson was charged with murder in the death of Kyplin Davis. Even though her body has not been found, she is unfortunately presumed to be deceased. 1 month before Olson's trial was set to begin, he pled guilty to first-degree manslaughter and was sentenced to 1 to 15 years in prison, instead of the life sentence he would have received had he been convicted of murder. Olson states through his attorney that he saw another individual hit Kyplin over the head with a rock and that he and the other person moved her body. He refuses to name the person he claims killed Kyplin. However, he does state that it was one of the 3 individuals charged with perjury. And despite the pressure of police as well as the family begging for answers, Olson has refused to tell anyone where Kyplin's body is located. Kyplin's father has even offered many times to help advocate for Olson if he would just tell them where Kyplin's remains are. When Kyplin's father begged Olson to tell them where they could find Kyplin's remains, Olson told him that he didn't have any information to share, and he blatantly refused to share any of the details of what happened on that fateful day in 1995. Olson continues to taunt and torment this family from prison by refusing to tell them where their daughter is located. According to an article in the Deseret News, court documents state allegations that Timothy Olson admitted to several friends of his that he raped and murdered Kyplin Davis before burying her body in Spanish Fork Canyon. The affidavit contains several statements from people who were interviewed by police following Kyplin's disappearance. In one instance, Olson was reported as stating, quote, "I can make someone disappear. I did it once, I can do it again," unquote. Olson allegedly also admitted to that same individual that he had, quote, "slept with her, beat her, and disposed of her body," unquote. That was a direct quote from the affidavit, and although it is an alleged statement, and even though our listeners can't see me right now, I am using air quotes when I say alleged, because I think we probably all have the same opinion of Timothy Olson right now, and his complete disregard for the victim and her family is just unfathomable to me. Another statement in the affidavit was from a witness who told police that Olson came to his house one night about 2 years after Kyplin's disappearance and was visibly drunk. And he was upset and began stating to his friend that the FBI was after him and that, quote, "I did it. I did it. I raped and killed Kyplin Davis," unquote.
What do you believe happened to your sister?
This is my thinking process, but I could honestly be wrong. I've been doing like a lot of going through my mind, like what have happened that day. I think she went off to go. I think he's probably thinking, okay, I'm gonna go get a drink or get lunch and just go somewhere and like come back. So I think she went out for a drive with Timmy and some other person. Went up driving somewhere up the canyon, and I think they stopped somewhere. I think she went off. I think she got out of the truck with this person, and I think Timmy just stayed in the truck, and then they went off somewhere. And I'm thinking there's some kind of like argument or whatever. Things kind of got out of hand. And eventually buried her or whatever, and then he went back to the truck and then took off, that day, and then eventually they come back and buried her body, That's my thinking process. And I've been thinking as like a 9-year-old, because like back then, when I was like, I had no idea what happened to my sister until like maybe like later on, I don't think I knew for sure what happened that day. I was 9. I was really young at the time.
Because of Olson's refusal to help investigators find Kyplin's remains, the Utah Board of Pardons and Parole has voted to force him to serve his entire sentence in the Utah State Prison. He is scheduled for release on February 10th, 2026. Kyplin's family still holds out hope that they will one day find her remains. Every year, Kyplin's loved ones find ways to honor their beautiful daughter, sister, and friend. Here's Karissa.
What do you and your family do to honor Kyplin in her memory?
And so, my dad actually, this is what Dad did at the beginning. Before we did like a headstone for my sister, my dad would go put flowers by my grandpa Davis's headstone, and then tell my grandpa, hey, look out for Kyplin for me, because my grandpa passed away back in '96, and so my dad at one point would put flowers on my grandpa's grave, and before we did anything to my sister, eventually my dad was doing cement work at the time because he owned his own business back then, and so he poured like a little base for it, and then me and my dad went up to go pick out a headstone for my sister. So I have like a picture of her and it's her birthday, and then I have the current name on it, but we left the death date on there blank because I think they wanted to wait until they found my sister, but we kind of knew for sure that May 2nd, the day she died. I mean, the parents did declare her dead at one point.
Just to definitely have that closure, I'm sure,
mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah, so we did that. We had like a little memorial with family and friends, and we dedicated that, I think, for my sister. That way we have a spot for her at the cemetery. That way if we do find her, we know where to bury her.
Don't you and her family and friends and a lot of people kind of make it a point on May 2nd of every year to try and wear blue in honor of her? Wasn't that her favorite color?
Yeah, that's what I've heard. Because I was like, what is her favorite? Well, actually, someone asked me, like, what's your favorite color? And I'm like, I don't know. And so and I asked someone, like, yeah, it's blue. And I'm like, oh, okay, thank you. And then it kind of went from there where it's just like, actually, me and a friend of mine, Camilla, we went to talk to the mayor at the time that I know pretty well. And so we got to talk to this Mayor Steve Layson was the mayor at the time. And I contacted my friend and said, hey, like, one willing to have me out with like something to do with my sister's birthday or anniversary she went missing. So like what we want to do is for my sister to keep her memory alive, to get her story out there. So we decided to do a kind of like visual for her back in like 2018 around that time in May, and that way we can get the word out, media out. And so we had it was like created a Facebook, basically, event, whatever. And so we tried that with my sister also with the other missing people too, because like my dad was like, you need to think about other families than ourselves. And it's like, oh, you're right, because Kyplin thought about others than herself. So we tied into other missing people. And so I've talked to like people like, hey, will you want to help me out with this? And they helped me out with like missing posters and whatnot. We got like going like on Facebook, and like she was helping me out like get the word out. So like we did a kind of like visual for her and also the missing people. That tied in with Kyplin Day. And so we went to the mayor at the time, Steve Layson, and we talked to him and told him kind of what's going on and everything. And then eventually we set a time to go talk to the city council, and we talked to him and told him what was going on. And then he declared Kyplin's Day, May 2nd. The whole blue thing, I didn't know about the whole blue thing, but I was like, that's pretty cool. And I did like stuff online for like events online. It went crazy. It went nuts. And I was like, it was like, this is awesome. This is awesome how this awesome community of friends and family just being supportive, of my family over the years.
What would you like to say to anyone out there who has a loved one who is missing or a loved one who has been murdered? What advice can you give to someone dealing with that type of loss?
For me, never give up, because for me, at a point where I've thought about honestly giving up, basically, because I had enough is enough. I got frustrated with the whole thing, but honestly, do not give up at all.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Gone in a Blink. Kyplin Davis was 15 years old at the time of her disappearance and would be 44 years old today. Anyone with information in this case is strongly urged to call the Spanish Fork PD at area code 801-798-5070. I want to give a special thank you to Karissa for talking with me and for being that voice for her sister. Kyplin was loved by so many, and she truly had so much to look forward to, and that was all taken from her in an instant by some teenagers who, even after all these years, would rather protect a murderer than to save a family from such unimaginable pain and heartbreak. Our hearts sincerely go out to the Davis family and everyone who knew and loved the beautiful soul, Kyplin Davis, who is now and always will be forever 15.